Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some disturbing horror stories from Reddit. And oh boy, do I have some amazing stories for you guys today. These are hands down some of the best stories I have ever read, and they're scary, they're disturbing, they're horrifying, and so you'll want to stick around. And I appreciate you stopping by. It means the world. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. But without further ado, let's get into some disturbing horror stories from Reddit. My daughter drew a picture of our house. There's a window in it we don't have. Written by Dude, It's Brian. I need to type this out because I don't know who else to tell. My wife thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am, but I know what I saw. And I need someone, anyone, to tell me I'm not crazy. My daughter Lily is 6. She's in that phase where she draws everything. The dog, her teacher, our house, you name it. The fridge is wallpapered in crayon. I love it. Every stick figure with its wild spaghetti hair makes me smile. That's what dads do. We stick the pictures up and tell them it's beautiful, and we mean it. 3 weeks ago, Lily handed me a drawing of our house. It was good for a 6-year-old. She got the color right, that faded blue vinyl siding we kept saying we'd get replaced. She drew the red front door, the 2 big windows on the first floor, the 2 on the second floor, and the little round attic vent near the peak. Except, she also drew a window on the second floor that doesn't exist. I didn't think much of it at first. She's 6. Kids add stuff. They put chimneys on ranch houses and give dogs 5 legs. I stuck it on the fridge with a ladybug magnet and I forgot about it. Then she drew the house again 2 days later. Same window, same spot between our bedroom and the bathroom on the east facing wall. In real life, that wall is just drywall on our side and siding on the outside. No window. Never has been one. I checked the original listing photos from when we first bought the place in 2019. No window. I asked her about it. Lily, what's this window here? She didn't look up from her coloring. That's the window where the man watches. I want to tell you, my blood ran cold, or whatever people say in these stories. It didn't. I felt annoyed. I figured one of her friends at school had been telling her ghost stories again, or she'd seen something on that damn iPad when we weren't looking. Kids say creepy shit all the time. I have a buddy whose 4-year-old told him you were nicer in your last life. Kids are just like that. What man, sweetheart? The man who lives in the middle. I asked her what the middle means. She shrugged the way kids do when they're done talking about something. Went back to giving a dinosaur purple spots. I let it go. I should not have let it go. Here's some context about our house. It's a 1987 colonial in a subdivision outside Raleigh. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2,400 square feet. When we moved in, the previous owners had already gutted and redone the kitchen and both bathrooms. Everything was original, including, presumably, the layout. The wall Lily kept drawing the window on sits between our master bedroom and the hall bathroom. On our side, there's a dresser pushed up against it. On the bathroom side, there's the linen closet. I've never given it a second thought in 5 years of living here. After the second drawing, I went upstairs and stood in the hallway. I looked at that wall. It's maybe 12 feet long, running from the bathroom door to where it meets the exterior wall. The linen closet takes up about 3 feet of it. Our dresser is pushed up against the bathroom side and covers maybe 4 feet. That leaves about 5 feet of wall that nothing is pushed against on either side. I knocked on it. I don't know why. I think I expected to feel stupid and move on. It sounded different. Our interior walls are standard drywall over studs. You knock on them and you get that hollow thud that everyone knows. This section The section with nothing on either side of it didn't thud. It was deeper, flatter, like there was more air behind it than there should have been. I told myself it was probably just a difference in insulation. Maybe a duct ran through there. Maybe the stud spacing was wider in that section. Old houses are weird. Ours isn't even that old, but whatever. I rationalized it and moved on. Then I went outside. I don't know what made me do it, some nagging part of my brain maybe. I walked out the front door, down the driveway, and turned around to look at the east side of the house. I counted windows. First floor, kitchen window, dining room window, correct. Second floor, master bedroom window, bathroom window, guest room window, correct. And about 5 feet of blank siding between the bedroom window and the bathroom window. Just vinyl. No window, no patch, no outline of anything that had ever been a window. But I stood there staring at it. And I swear to God, the spacing was wrong. Here's what I mean. On a house like ours, the windows are evenly distributed. They line up with the rooms behind them, and the gaps between them are proportional. But the gap between our bedroom window and the bathroom window was wider than it should have been. Not by a lot, maybe 2 feet, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. 2 feet isn't much on a wall, but 2 feet is enough for something to be between them. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling while my wife Sarah breathed slow and steady next to me. I kept doing math in my head. Our master bedroom is 14 feet wide. The bathroom is 8. The hallway is 3.5. That's 25.5 feet of interior space. I got up, went downstairs, and pulled up the county property records on my laptop. The house footprint showed the second floor as 31 feet across on the east-west axis. I did the math 4 times. Every time I got the same answer. There were 5.5 unaccounted feet in that wall. Not 2, not a duck chase, 5.5 feet. At 2 a.m., I went back upstairs with a tape measure. I measured the master bedroom wall to wall, 14 feet, 2 inches. I measured the hallway, 3 feet, 8 inches. I measured the bathroom, 8 feet even. I measured the guest bedroom on the other side. The thickness of interior walls accounted for roughly another 10 inches total. I was off by about 5 feet, 4 inches. There was a space inside our wall that was 5 feet wide, and I had no idea what was in it. I pressed my ear against the drywall in the hallway, the section that sounded wrong. I held my breath. The house was dead silent. That 3 a.m. silence where even the refrigerator feels loud. I didn't hear anything. I think that's what scared me the most, because I was listening for something. And the silence that came back was the wrong kind. You know how you can hear the difference between an empty room and a room where someone is being very, very quiet? It was the second kind. The next morning, I told Sarah. She gave me that look. The one she uses when I'm being on my 3rd cup of coffee and spiraling about something I read online at 1 a.m. Brian, it's an old house. There's probably a plumbing chase or a mechanical shaft or something. You're gonna tear our wall open because Lily drew a window? She wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Plumbing chases exist. HVAC shafts exist, but 5 feet wide? Every chase I've ever seen in a residential build is maybe 16 to 20 inches. You don't need 5 feet to run some PVC and copper. I called my buddy Marcus, who does contracting work. He came by that Thursday with a stud finder and an inspection camera. One of those little borescope things you snake through a hole. We started in the hallway. The stud finder picked up a framing at normal 16-inch intervals across most of the wall. Then it hit a section where it went haywire. The readings were inconsistent, like there was framing, then open air, then something else, then more framing. Marcus drilled a small hole in the drywall about 4 feet up, 1/4 inch. Nothing structural. He fed the camera in. He looked at the screen for maybe 5 seconds before he pulled back. "What?" I said. He looked at me with an expression I've never seen on his face before. Marcus is a big dude, built like a linebacker, and he's been doing construction for 20 years. He's crawled through attics with rat infestations and gone under crawl spaces that smelled like something died. Nothing phases him. He handed me the camera without saying a word. The screen showed a narrow space, maybe 5 feet wide, just like I'd calculated. It ran floor to ceiling, rough framing on either side. The camera's LED illuminated raw plywood flooring, no insulation, no pipes, no ductwork, nothing mechanical at all. It was just a room. A tall, narrow room sealed inside our wall. No door, no window, no access point that we could see from this angle. But that's not why Marcus looked like that. On the far side of the space, pushed up against what would be the exterior wall, there was a chair. A wooden chair, like a kitchen chair. It was facing the interior wall, facing toward our bedroom. And on the plywood floor around the chair, arranged in a pattern I couldn't immediately make sense of, were dozens of small, dark objects. The camera resolution wasn't great, but I could make out shapes. They looked like bundles, little fabric bundles tied with string. "Is that?" I started. "We need to call someone," Marcus said. "Not me, someone else. I'm not going in there, man. I'm sorry. I can't do that." I didn't understand his reaction until I tilted the camera up towards the ceiling of the space. Scratched into the raw wood of the subfloor above, the underside of our attic floor were tally marks. Hundreds of them, organized in neat groups of 5, covering almost every visible surface. And below the tally marks, in letters that have been carved slowly, deliberately, with something sharp, I can hear them sleep. I called the police. Of course I called the police. 2 officers came out, and then a detective, and then more people. They opened the wall from the hallway side, cut through the drywall in a wide rectangle. The smell came first. Not rot, not decay. It smelled stale, like air that hadn't moved in a very long time, but also faintly sweet, in a way that made my stomach turn. The space was exactly what the camera showed. 5 feet, 4 inches wide, ran the full depth of the house, about 24 feet front to back, floor to ceiling, framed out with proper studs and joists. This wasn't a gap or an oversight. Someone had built this space on purpose. It was in the original construction. The chair was a standard wooden kitchen chair, the kind you'd buy at a yard sale for $5. It was positioned facing the wall shared with our bedroom. Directly on the other side of that wall was the spot where our bed's headboard sits. The bundles on the floor were small fabric pouches, hand-stitched from what looked like old cotton. The police collected 26 of them. They wouldn't tell me what was inside. I found out later from a friend at the sheriff's department. Hair. Each pouch contained a small lock of hair, tied with brown thread. Different lengths, different colors. Our house has had 4 owners since it was built in 1987. That's 4 families. multiple people in each family. People who slept on the other side of that wall, never knowing. The tally marks on the ceiling numbered over 3,000. The detective asked me if I'd ever noticed anything unusual in the house. I said no. Then I stopped, because that wasn't always true. I'd always wondered why our bedroom door wouldn't stay open. You had to wedge something under it, or it would drift shut on its own, slowly, like the house was exhaling. We always assumed the first floor was slightly uneven, old house, settling. But I realize now that the floor wasn't uneven. The wall was. 5 feet and 4 inches of hidden space will do that. The weight distribution of the second floor was asymmetric in a way that no one had ever noticed, and it pulled our bedroom door gently closed every single time, sealing us in. The police found one more thing that I haven't told Sarah about. On the wall facing our bedroom, at about chest height, someone had made a hole. Not a big one, maybe the diameter of a pencil. It went clean through the framing, through the drywall, and came out behind our dresser. I moved the dresser. The hole was there, clean, round, and angled slightly downward, toward our bed. It had been patched on our side at some point with a tiny circle of matching paint. You would never see it unless you knew where to look. I've been sleeping 6 feet from that hole for 5 years. The police are investigating. They pulled the original building permits and are trying to track down the contractor who built the house in '87. The original owner died in 2004. The second and third owners have been contacted. No one knew about the space. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The thing I keep circling back to. Those tally marks. Over 3,000. If you assume 1 mark per night and the neat, methodical grouping in 5 suggests that's exactly how they were counted, that's over 8 years of nights. Our house was built in 1987. The first owners lived there from '87 to '96. 9 years. The second owners, '96 to 2008, 12 years. Third owners, 2008 to 2019, 11 years. Us, 2019 to now, 5 years. 3,000 tally marks don't fit inside any single owner's timeline, but they could fit across several, which means either someone sealed themselves in that space for 8 years straight, no food, no water, no door, or someone has been getting in and out without any of us ever knowing. I've looked everywhere. There's no hatch, no hidden door, no panel. The space is sealed, framed, drywalled, and sealed on every side. The only opening was the pencil-width hole behind our dresser, and the chair wasn't dusty. I keep thinking about that. The bundles on the floor were carefully placed. The tally marks were sharp, not faded, and when they opened the wall, the air that came out was stale. Yes. Old. Yes. But it was warm. We're staying at my in-laws' place. Lily seems fine. She hasn't drawn the house since we left. I asked her one more time about the man who watches from the window. He's not there anymore, Daddy. How do you know? She looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. Because he left when we did. I don't know where we're going to live. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe in a house again. But I keep thinking about those other families. The ones who slept in that bedroom for years. their heads against that wall, while someone sat in a chair on the other side and listened. 3,000 nights. Someone counted every single one. And I think about all the houses in our subdivision. Same builder, same year, same floor plan. There are 46 houses on our street. I wonder how many of them have a window that isn't there. Episode number 1564, written by No Ideal Way. I had to sleep with my parents far longer than most kids do. They woke me up nearly every night, at least until I learned to do it myself. I wasn't allowed at sleepovers because of their fear that something would go terribly wrong. When I needed it, they would help me gain consciousness by kneading my armpits and knee pits. The neurologist said that if the hyperventilation continued to cause seizures, I could lose my ability to speak, my memory, and my overall independence. So they had to adapt, and it cost me most of my childhood. When I finally figured out how to wake myself up, the sleep paralysis got better in some ways and worse in others. I was able to get the breathing problems under control, but the dream state hallucinations escalated. A little boy wearing a disfigured horse head like a mask, a young woman hanging in the corner of my room, her neck bent downward with her chin buried in her chest, my father without his mouth or eyes. The Stork Man was appearing more frequently. He started looming closer to my face while I was in these catatonic states. He would whisper to me in a language that I've never been able to decipher, often for what felt like hours. But when it got bad, I'd remember my 5-step plan. Step 1, recognize that you're dreaming. You can't move and you're seeing things. This is not reality. Step 2, stay calm. It will only get worse if you start panicking. Step 3, wiggle. Start with your toes. They're always awake, just like your mind is right now. Wiggle them. You're not moving. You're not paralyzed. Continue to your ankles, and then your knees and hips. Step 4, sit up when you can. Sit up. Don't panic and sit up. Step 5, you're awake now. Write down what you can remember. You'll learn from your experience. It's been about 17 years since I first implemented the plan. I've now documented over 1,500 episodes. Some only last a couple of seconds. Most make it harder to fall asleep the next night. Lately, the main constant I can rely on is my wife. Having someone you trust beside you helps. She keeps me grounded. The hallucinations aren't always as vivid, and she often helps me wake up without my usual procedure. I still have bad nights, but she's there to comfort me when it's over. She helps me log everything with more detail so I continue making progress. She's also been trying to get to the bottom of my issue, even though my psychiatrist has reinforced the same diagnosis that my neurologist gave me years ago. Hereditary narcolepsy, they call it. I'm not like the narcoleptics you may think of. I don't fall asleep at random times like a goat that's been jump scared. I really don't even have issues with daytime sleepiness. I'm tired at normal times, unless I experience a bad episode that keeps me up. The main distinction with my diagnosis is that my brain functions like it's on LSD once I enter REM sleep. For normal people, their REM cycle causes a vivid dream state where their brain is highly active, but regulated. This mirrors the brain activity of consciousness. It's called paradoxical sleep. My brain works in overdrive once I enter REM. It works exponentially harder, even than when I'm awake, and it's not regulated. I can sense all of my surroundings like they're one and the same with my body. I experience these severe hallucinations, and my hyperactive vitals are always a threat. All of this while my body is in a state of atonia. If I were to ever unable to wake up, if I was stuck in my sleep paralysis, my heart could work itself into a rupture. I'd asphyxiate on my own blood while sleeping. That's the other sentiment that my doctors have shared. It's a miracle that I haven't died. Despite this diagnosis, my wife believes that the Stork Man is the root of my issue, that he means something to my subconscious. I didn't buy this theory until the other night, when he whispered to me in a different language. It was hardly noticeable, but it didn't involve the guttural clicks and deep exhalations that I'm used to hearing. It was more clear. It was human. Ro-na-shi. I butchered the pronunciation when I squirmed to life in a cold sweat, shaking my wife awake to announce the sudden development, and she recognized something about this word, that it was likely Latin. So we stayed up through the morning, combing the Latin dictionary until there were no doubts about what I heard. Renashi, the Latin root of the modern word renaissance, a verb that means to be born again. It makes sense, right? For a stork to tell me this? To imply something about birth and about change? It's odd now, looking back to when I first started calling him the Stork Man. I was very young, probably with only a couple of bird species in my lexicon. It's not like he looks like any particular type of bird. His beak is long, like that of a stork or heron, but it's more of a fleshy protrusion than one of hard cartilage. His eyes are positioned at the side of his face, wide and always glaring. And perhaps his most disturbing feature hides behind his thin, veiled shawl. He's shown them to me on a number of occasions. They touch the floor despite his 7-foot frame with ease, jagged, emaciated, and gnarled. Each malformed crank coupled with localized blooms of misshapen feathers that segment his otherwise unclothed, leathery appendages. His disgusting wings. They often rub up against me as he puffs into my frozen face with his clicks and gurgles. It's a traumatic event every time I encounter him, but it's routine. Following this episode from him just over a week ago, my wife and I expanded on our theory about my nemesis and my subconscious. It had to mean something that I initially named him what I did. And after all this time, he says this? We wondered if this thing about rebirth could relate to the recent curbing of my symptoms. Before that encounter, I hadn't experienced a memorable hallucination in 94 days. By far, the longest stretch that I can recall. She brought up the possibility that the Stork Man could be threatening me with an incoming assault of visions. His sudden voice could be a war cry against my dream self, saying that the ailment was about to come back stronger than ever. I countered this thought process. It was certainly possible that the opposite was true. Maybe I was finally conquering this, reforming myself, and the Stork Man was simply saying his goodbyes. But along the way, I forgot something. The first step of my 5-step plan. The reminder that I'm not dealing with real beings that have goals. They are hallucinations. The Stork Man is not real. He didn't just appear to relay something to my subconscious. He is my subconscious, just like every other hallucination I've ever had. And that realization made us panic. Our little boy turned 5 years old the night the Stork Man spoke to me. That was the age that I first saw him, at least from what my parents told me. The terrifying reality is that I carry the recessive gene that could pass this horrible sickness onto our boy. My subconscious was preparing me for even more years of trauma, telling me that my disease would rekindle itself within my child. It had been warning me of this possibility for years. My poor wife would now be dealing with constant panic attacks in the middle of the night, not knowing if the two people she loved the most would wake up, not knowing if one of us, or both, would die, frozen in fear. so all we could do was wait. My wife was sleeping in his room every night, waiting, knowing that I was equipped to wake myself up, knowing that our child wouldn't be able to do the same should he have his first run-in. Night after night, monitoring his sleep like a security guard, protecting an empty warehouse. And she was right about the incoming assault. I experienced some of the worst episodes of my life in that span. Night after night, my darkest visions manifested themselves all at once. The horse boy climbing on top of me like a jungle gym, whining at his gold cowl bobbled and sloshed with every sudden and excited movement. My mother, who OD'd when I was in my teens, sobbing aggressively as she knelt, praying at the foot of my bed, begging for my forgiveness. The woman that was hanging, now directly above me, close enough that I smelled her rotting feet as they dangled over me. Her bent neck angled so far downward that her dead face stared at me straight on, mouth unnaturally agape, like she wanted to tell me something. It all culminated tonight. Episode number 1564. The Stork Man entered my room as he usually does. He faced through the wall directly in front of me, beak first. He cocked his head, showing me his left eye and then his right, wide and focused. The shawl dropped to reveal his vile limbs. His talons scratched the hardwood as he glitched forward with his bird-like mannerisms. He whispered and rattled, but it was coherent. Renasi. He towered over my carcass. I tried to wiggle. I knew what was happening. Nothing worked. He hunched over me, saliva seeping out of his improperly sealed gape. He wheezed again. Renasi. I was looking directly into his mouth. It was darker than black. He stopped further, now closer than ever. He opened wide enough for me to understand blindness. I couldn't even see the black, just nothingness. I felt him swallowing my immobile head with his proboscis, wet and cold, rancid smelling. His throat rippled, and then it was loud. Renasi. Blinded by him, deafened by him, I could still feel him. Time was irrelevant, but it had to be forever. And then I woke up, back in my childhood bed. And now I'm sitting here, writing everything down. I have no way to explain to myself what just happened. I'm looking around my room, remembering things that I haven't thought about in years. My pile of PS4 games is still on the floor in the corner. My unopened 2nd edition Bumblebee figurine is staring at me from the shelf that my dad and I built specifically for him. I wonder if he saw anything. My mom is whimpering as she did often. I have a feeling they know I'm here. Why didn't they wake me up? Maybe I'll go check on her. But I'm still trying my best to remember. The episodes stand out the most. They might be all I have. I remember getting married in New Orleans. I remember the honeymoon in Italy. I remember our arguments about the baby. I remember taking him to his first rodeo. I remember how much he loved it, just like I do. I remember her depression after he was born. I think I forgot to pick up her prescription. I've remembered as best I can, but I can't remember their names. I can't remember their faces. I wasn't allowed to see my face. Written by FreeRing573. Most of my childhood was spent in the same 20 square miles of forest, somewhere in the Appalachian wilderness. I lived there with my mom in this cabin she claims to have built with her own 2 hands. I believed her for a while. Though now I'm fairly certain she just found an abandoned cabin and fixed it up as best she could. It was so cold in the winter, and the small fires we managed to produce in the fireplace did little to warm the area. Most winter nights were spent with us cuddled under the same blanket. During the summers, the cabin was so humid that you could see the wood sweating. Often we'd opt for sleeping outside on summer nights. Despite the clouds of mosquitoes that the makeshift netting my mom made from old fabric did little to quell. The multitude of bug bites was preferable to waking up dehydrated from sweat, though. Our days back then were mostly spent with my mom hunting for small animals to cook and eat, while I gathered firewood and picked berries. On rare occasions, we would take breaks and spend the day singing songs or reading from the handful of books she had. However, we needed to survive, and that meant working hard to ensure we had food and fresh water. My mask made foraging more difficult than it should have been. I constantly had to pull out the white cotton sheet to fit the eye holes over my eyes, and would often become drenched in sweat within an hour. The only time I ever took off my mask was when my mom bathed me. I would often try to catch my reflection in the water, but it was never clean enough. I wondered if she'd ever seen my face. She would have had to have seen it on the day I was born, right? I learned early on not to ask my mom questions that involved the masks or my face. The only answer I ever received was that if I took off my mask in front of someone, something bad would happen. If I pushed any further, she would say, "I'm your mother, and you should trust that I know what's best." And I did, for a long time. My mother was my whole world, and I loved her as much as a boy could. We spent most of our time together, and I have mostly happy memories of her. Of course, there are bad memories sprinkled in there, with some being downright horrible. I recall once when I was somewhere between 4 and 6. I was playing outside in our garden. Mom was on the other side of the yard doing laundry while I hopped through the soft dirt, stepping on any pests I saw. Looking at their guts on the underside of my shoes every time I stepped on one filled me with a sense of satisfaction, knowing I was aiding in our survival in a small way. I'd made my way to the end of the garden when I noticed the rabbit cage. Mom had kept several she'd caught in traps to breed for meat. She told me not to get attached to any of them, as we'd be eating them all at some point. But of course, I'd given them all names and loved sticking my fingers in the cage to feel their soft fur. One of the females, whom I'd named Daisy, after a character in one of Mom's books, was staring at me. She chewed on whatever vegetation she had in her mouth as I approached. She didn't scurry or hide like all the others in the cage, instead continuing to look me in the eyes. The curious way she watched me made me smile underneath my mask. We looked at each other for a while before I got the sudden urge to untie the twine from my neck. It fell to the ground, and I slowly pulled the mask away from my face. Daisy continued staring as I moved my bare face closer to hers. A warmth fell over me as she stared. The feeling of having someone, even a small-minded creature like a rabbit, see my real face was almost euphoric. The rabbit didn't cower, as I thought it might upon seeing my face. The way my mom pushed to keep my face hidden made me think there was something horrible about it. But if there was, Daisy didn't care. She didn't look at me any differently than she might my mom or one of the other rabbits. It made me smile brighter than I ever had. "Nestor," called my mom from around the corner. I struggled to grab my mask from the ground and throw it back to my face, but it was too late. Mom grabbed me by the shoulder while staring at the sky and smacked the back of my head hard enough to make my vision blur. "Put your mask back on right now," she cried. I did as she asked, and she pulled me away from the scene, leaving Daisy still staring in the spot where I'd been standing. We had Daisy for dinner that night. Mom didn't have to tell me. As I'd seen her take Daisy from the cage from my bedroom window, I listened to her frantic squeaks before Mom likely broke her neck. as was her common method for killing our dinner. Daisy lay in a charred pile in the center of the table that night. Mom pulled off one of her legs and threw it on my plate. "Eat," she said. Tears soaked the inside of my mask as I pulled down the mouth hole a bit so it sat as close to my mouth as I could get it. I picked up Daisy's leg and brought it to my lips. "Eat," she yelled. I took a bite of the unseasoned meat and tore it away from the bone. I closed my eyes while chewing and swallowed. Mom nodded and began eating some breast meat, satisfied. "Do you realize what could have happened if I accidentally saw you without your mask?" she asked. "No, you won't tell me," I returned defiantly. Mom paused as if trying to gather her thoughts. She sighed, then gave her constant answer of something bad. I felt my mask, poking at the small holes that had begun to form along the neck. I'd have a new one the first time I met another person. Like the last mask, this one was made from cloth, but it was a bit thicker, as if it were made from a thick jacket. Despite this, it breathed better, making the summer trips collecting berries a bit more bearable. I was 8 or 9 years old during one of these trips, and several yards from us, I spotted a bush covered in red berries. We avoided the green berries, but most of what we ate was dark purple and bitter. However, the red ones had a sweet, tangy flavor that I still crave sometimes. I rushed over to them, carrying my basket in tow. I hadn't gotten used to my long legs and arms from my growth spurt earlier that year, so I awkwardly flopped around before reaching the bush. As I approached, it moved a little, like something was inside. I moved closer, assuming it was a squirrel or some other small critter I could easily fight off. A mop of blonde hair poked out from the side of the bush. I rounded it to see the back of a kid. They turned as soon as I approached, and I was met with a blue-eyed, skinny blonde girl. She was around my age. Her hair fell past her shoulders, and it was full of leaves. The dirt stains on her clothes and scratches across her bare legs told me she'd been in the woods a while. "Hi," the girl said with a bright smile. I backed away a bit. "Why are you wearing a mask? Are you a superhero?" she asked with a mocking laugh. "Superhero?" I asked. "Yeah," she returned before reaching into her back pocket and pulling out a rolled comic book. She handed it to me, and I saw Spider-Man written on the front. It was the first time I'd ever seen anyone else in a mask, though this was a lot cooler than mine. "You should wear one like him instead," the girl said. The sound of leaves crunching sounded behind me, and I saw my mom approach with her bow and arrow. Her eyes widened when she noticed the girl. "Hello," the girl said. I watched my mom's hands shake as she held the bow and arrow tightly against her side. Another sound came from behind the girl, and Mom quickly lifted the weapon. It was a man with a large brown beard. He spotted my mom instantly and threw his hands up in submission while slowly moving in front of the girl. "Who are you?" Mom asked. Hello," he said. "I'm Monty, and this is my daughter, Jamie. We're camping nearby. Sorry, I didn't know we were on someone's property." Mom refused to lower the bow and arrow. "You need to leave." "Is this your property?" the man asked. Mom bit her lip, and her arms started to shake. "Yes," she said. "Would the parks office confirm that if I called?" he asked. Mom lowered the bow a little. "Jamie, why don't you go find some firewood?" he said. "But Dad..." "Go!" Jamie pursed her lips and glanced at me before stomping away. "Look, if you're this deep in the woods, I assume you're hiding from something just like we are," he said to my mom before looking at me and raising his eyebrow. "We don't want any trouble, but I don't care what you're doing out here, honestly." "See that tree?" Mom said, pointing to the tallest one in the area. "Don't cross it again. You or your girl." "You got it," Monty said with a smile. And with that, my mom lowered her weapon. I was just bluffing, by the way. I ain't got a phone. Too easy to track. Mom grabbed me by the arm and pulled as we started walking back home. If you ever want to trade some of your kills, let me know, he said. We've got plenty of beans and rice. Mom ignored him. We're in the RV down the trail about 2 miles, he called. I looked back and saw the girl waving. I didn't stop looking until they disappeared in the distance. I helped Mom gut the rabbit she'd caught us for dinner, holding the bag for the innards as she ripped them out of the small creature. She hadn't said much since we met the father and daughter in the woods, and I couldn't tell if she was concerned or mad. I knew I should avoid bringing it up, but I couldn't help myself. I thought you said there was no one else in these woods, I said as she placed a handful of viscera into the bag. There weren't, she said, and I need to figure out a way to get rid of them. Why? I asked. They didn't seem dangerous. She paused. Everyone is dangerous, Nestor. I dropped my head and stared into the bag for a while, not meaning to. My eyes got lost in the red and pink mixture that slid with every slight movement. The image of the girl plopped into my head and wouldn't seem to leave. You're thinking about her, aren't you? Mom asked. Over time, I've learned many moms have this ability to predict exactly what their child is thinking, or at least offer a good guess. She was around your age. I looked at my mom, then back into the bag. She dropped the rabbit onto the wood slab and knelt in front of me. I know you're lonely, but you know it has to be this way, she said. But why? I asked. You never tell me. I tell you that you need to trust me, she said before standing back up. And that should be the only explanation you need. It wasn't, though. I don't know if it was the fact that my mind was changing in adolescence or I'd finally had enough, but I'd already started thinking of ways I could sneak away and meet that girl again. I know what will make you feel better, Mom said before taking off her blood-stained gloves and going inside. She came back out a few minutes later, holding something behind her back. She stopped in front of me, and my hands started to shake with excitement. I'd never gotten a gift before and never expected one. The feeling of excitement was something I hadn't had much experience with. She paused for a few more moments as I felt I was about to burst. She finally revealed what looked like a light brown mass, the color of a dying tree. She smiled as she handed it to me. It felt smooth and almost sticky. I pulled the edges apart to see that it was a new mask, but it was nothing like the ones I'd had before. This one had actual facial features, a mouth with lips, a nose like my mom's, and eyebrows. I made it with rabbit skins, she said. I thought you'd like to have that one that looks like an actual face. I stared at it, trying to appear grateful but struggling to understand how I actually felt. Well, try it on, she said. I did as she asked, pulling the thin leather across my head into my neck. It fit tightly against my head. The eye holes were perfectly situated so I wouldn't have to pull the mask down to see. You probably won't want to wear it in the summer, but I tried to make it more comfortable and durable than your last one. I breathed in the gamey smell of the leather and pressed my tongue against the inside of my mouth. Well, what do you think? She asked. Thanks, I said, wishing it looked more like Spider-Man's. Mom was always exhausted after a day of hunting, especially during the summer. It was almost impossible to wake her up. Once she fell asleep, I snuck out of the cabin and into the woods. I followed the path, remembering what Monty said about the RV being 2 miles down the trail. As I walked in the darkness, I wondered why I was trying so hard to see this girl again. I'd been fine living my whole life without anyone besides Mom. I'd begun to wonder if that feeling of complacency came from a secluded life. I'd been walking for around half an hour when I heard voices a few yards away. I ducked into the nearby trees and spotted a fire that gave way to a dingy brown RV. Monty sat in a chair beside the fire while Jamie danced around it. I moved closer without meaning to, not realizing I was no longer hidden. Jamie spotted me as she rounded the fire. I watched her say something to him before she came skipping towards me. "Hey, Spider-Man," she said. "I like your new mask." "Thanks," I said. "My name is Nestor." I like Spider-Man better," she said. "Come on, I told my dad I was going to pee, but I want to show you something." She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the woods. Her hand was soft and warm, despite it being chilly that night. I still remember that. The temperature of her hand left an impression on mine that seemed to remain for years. We walked a few yards more until she stopped at a small ditch with a thin stream at the bottom. She smiled at me before sliding down to the edge of the stream. I paused before following. At the bottom, she caught my arm and stopped me from going face first into the creek. She laughed and I laughed back. "Look," she said, pointing in the creek. I scanned the surface of the dark water, unsure of what she was pointing at. "Tadpoles," she said with excitement. I looked again, and in the moon's reflection, I saw tiny black dots swimming near the edge of the creek. "They'll grow legs soon," she said. "That's what I learned in school. Do you go to school?" I shook my head. "Yeah, I'm not right now, but my dad said I can go back soon, when we leave the woods." Despite not knowing her well, the thought of her leaving made my chest hurt. "Jamie," cried Monty from somewhere in the woods. "I gotta go," she said softly. "Come visit me again. Just whistle 3 times, and I'll come find you in the woods." She climbed up the ditch and waved before disappearing. I only went to visit her on the nights my mom was exhausted. Sometimes Jamie was already in bed when I arrived. We only saw each other once every couple of weeks, but the times we saw each other made up for all the other time I was away that I wanted to see her. Seeing her was like seeing sunshine after weeks of rain. On these late night meetings, Jamie told me all about her life out of the woods, the friends she had back in her hometown, the restaurants she'd missed, the afternoon she spent at their local library reading whichever book had the coolest cover. "Have you ever read The Boxcar Children?" she asked me one night. I shook my head. My mom had a small collection of books, and most were too long for me to be interested in. The only 3 I had read from her collection were one about local wildlife and an old cookbook with faded letters. "Whenever I leave, you can visit me, and I'll let you borrow it," she said while hitting tall blades of grass with a stick. "I have the whole collection. Oh, and we can go see the movies. I love going to the movies. I used to go all the time with my mom and dad before they broke up." "Broke up?" I asked. "Yeah, it's like when adults decide they don't like each other anymore, so they stop living together." She knew so much more than me about movies, books, the world, everything. "You've really lived out here your whole life, Spider-Man?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so," I said. "That's cool. You're like this guy in this movie I like called Tarzan, except you weren't raised by gorillas, right?" She laughed. We found a clearing and sat in the cool grass. Fireflies flew around the tall grass like embers. We looked at each other, and she smiled, and I smiled back. She picked at the grass to her side, randomly glancing at me. "Why do you wear a mask?" she asked, not looking up at me. I knew it would come eventually, though I liked how long she'd gone before asking. "My mom says something bad will happen," I said, wondering if I should have come up with a cooler reason. She picked at the grass a few more seconds before standing up and dusting her hands. "Works for me," she said before offering her hand to help me up. And as we stood in the moonlight, I knew there was no way my face was nearly as nice as hers. We'd met each other every few weeks for around a year without either of us getting caught, though I got the feeling her dad wouldn't care as much as my mom would. One night when I came back, my mom was waiting in the yard, staring into the woods. She spotted me, and her eyes grew wide with anger. "Where the hell were you?" she cried, moving towards me like an angry bull. She grabbed me by the shoulders and tried to look in my eyes, but I refused to meet them. "Just out for a walk," I said. "You're meeting that girl, weren't you?" she asked. "You know we can't trust them." I pulled away from my mom, and she stepped back, surprised. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. She's my friend, I said. My only friend. I thought I was your friend, she returned, her voice dropping. I paused. Friends don't keep secrets from each other. You don't tell me anything. Mom looked at the ground. I could see the thoughts racing through her head. She was considering something. Why do we have to stay here, I asked. Why can't I have friends? Why can't I go to school? Why do I have to wear a mask? Mom bit her lip, and her eyes met mine. They were red and ready to break with tears. I waited for an answer, hoping she'd finally decide to share something with me. She gripped her fists, then released them. She sighed and started back to the cabin, leaving me where I was standing. Keep playing with her if you want, she said. Just keep your mask on. Another year or so passed. I was still frustrated with my mom for not sharing more information with me, but I was happy I didn't have to sneak out to meet Jamie. We even started meeting in the daylight, making it much easier to explore the woods together. I showed her all the things I'd learned over the years about how to identify poisonous plants, how to find your way home if you got lost, and how to track animals. Wow, you know a lot about the woods, she said. Why didn't you ever tell me? I shrugged. Will you teach me how to shoot a bow and arrow, she asked. Mom had just taught me, so I wasn't sure how well I could teach her. However, the pleas in her eyes kept me from saying no. We found a spot near a clearing in the woods where my mom would often hunt for quails. We ducked behind a log, and I set up a bow and arrow on top of it. A small flock of quail bobbed in and out of the tall grass. I picked a larger one closer to us than the rest and aimed the arrow just as my mom had taught me. The quail bobbed again, and I took a deep breath before letting the arrow go. The flock flew into the air, leaving the arrow on the ground, pointed towards the sky. We walked to the clearing and found the quail struck through its chest in the arrow. That was amazing, she cried. I want to try. It was the first animal I'd ever killed on my own, and I loved that Jamie was here to see it. It made me realize that I wanted her there for all of the big moments in my life. We went back to the log with my quail and hid. An hour or so passed before the flock returned and started picking at seeds and insects on the ground. I handed Jamie the bow and arrow. What do I do? She asked, holding the bow and arrow at her sides. You have to show me, silly. I awkwardly moved towards her and placed my arms around her shoulders. I lifted her arm with the arrow, then the one with the bow. I positioned them in the right spots slowly. Her hair smelled like sweat and dirt, but I liked it. You have to take aim and take a breath before shooting, I said. You need to make sure you're completely relaxing, and taking a breath helps. Okay, she said. How far do I pull the string back? I gulped before putting my hand over hers. She breathed quickly as I scared her, but quickly settled into my arms. I cupped my hand around hers and pulled the string back. She looked at me and smiled. I think I got it, she said. I moved away as I noticed my heart beating harder than it should have had. She aimed the arrow and took a breath. She let it go, and the flock flew away. We both watched the arrow for a moment and saw it move. We ran to it and saw the quail shot in the side. I pulled the arrow out, and the tiny bird struggled to move away from us. Oh no, she said. I could see her starting to cry. It's okay, I said, picking up the quail and holding it between us. Do you think we can help? Before she could finish her thought, I twisted the bird's neck, and it went limp. I held it to him, and she stared at him wide-eyed. I cocked my head at her, but she looked away. It's okay, you can keep it, she said. We spent the rest of that day at a clearing close to her campsite. She poked at rocks with her pocket knife and stared at the forest, not saying anything. I was about to ask her what was wrong when she dropped her head and began sobbing. What's wrong? I asked. She looked back up, then to me. I want to go home. I dropped my head. I know my dad is hiding me from my mom, she said. He picked me up from school one day and told me we were going on a fun trip and that we'd go home soon. I believed him for a long time, but I'm not a stupid kid anymore. I miss my mom. I miss my old friends. I know she didn't mean to make me feel bad, but hearing it all hurt. I thought she was happy out here with me. That all we needed was each other. I want to leave, she said, and I want you to go with me. I sat back. What? I can't. I can't leave. She pursed her lips and set her head on her knees. Why do you wear that mask? I have to. Because your mom says. I paused, then nodded. Your mom's lying, just like my dad is. I bet you $1 million nothing will happen if you take off your mask right now. She moved her hand towards me and gripped the neck of the mask. I pulled back and she let go. She paused and tried again, and this time I allowed her to untie the twine. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as she gently pulled upwards on the mask, careful to avoid yanking too hard around my nose and eyes. Everything went black as the last bit of the mask traveled up my face. But then, Jamie's smiling face greeted me with the sun behind it. We stared at each other for several moments. See? Nothing, she said. And you don't have any hideous scars or anything. Really? I asked. She shook her head, then leaned in, kissing me on the lips. My eyes widened in surprise for a moment, but I quickly relaxed as it felt right. Perfect. She pulled away and smiled again. My smile was so big, my cheeks started to hurt. Let's leave. Tonight, she said. Tonight? She nodded. I can grab food and stuff to last us a while. And you can use your forced knowledge to lead us back to the road. Some adults will have to pick up some kids they see on the side of the road. I'll tell them where my mom lives and we can go back there. Your mom would let me stay, I asked. She nodded. Of course. She stood up and offered her hand to me. I took it and pulled myself up. Meet me here when the moon is in the center of the sky, she said. 1,000 thoughts went through my mind as I stood there, holding Jamie's hand. I wondered if this was really a good idea, if my mom would be okay without me, if I was ready to leave the woods, but I knew I could do all of it as long as I was with Jamie. I nodded. She started out of the clearing with me a few feet behind her. She paused, causing me to stop. She stood still for several seconds with her arms at her sides, the pocket knife in her hand shaking. Jamie, I asked, are you okay? She turned to me with wide eyes and her mouth clenched. Jamie? I moved towards her, but she lifted the knife. I stood frozen as she moved it towards her head, holding it a few inches from her cheek. She stuck the knife deep in her face and I screamed. She pulled against the handle, dragging the blade along her face. I ran to stop her, but a kick to my stomach sent me to the ground. Jamie continued doing that to her face, dragging it along her forehead and down to her ears. I leapt up to stop her again, but again and again, she managed to keep me away while continuing to do that to her flesh. Jamie, cried a voice from the woods. Monty distracted me for a moment as he came running into the clearing from behind me. I heard a scream, he said while approaching, and noticed the knife in Jamie's face and the blood running down her neck. Jamie, he cried. He ran quickly towards her, glancing at me along the way. He paused a few feet behind me, and I stood between the two of them as the horrible sounds of Jamie's knife still working down her face filled my ears and made my legs immobile. Monty stared blank-faced at me for a moment, then dug into his pocket without looking down. He pulled out a much larger knife than Jamie's and stuck it into his own cheek, starting to cut along the same pattern she had. I clocked the silence from behind me and turned. I didn't want to see what Jamie had done, but I couldn't stop myself. My brain wanted to leave as quickly as I could, but something buried deep told me to look. I looked upon a bloody mess of musculature. Her eyelids were still there, though she didn't blink. Her nose was gone, as were her lips, revealing 2 rows of small teeth. The sounds of Monty continuing to slice sounded behind me as my eyes traveled down Jamie's body. At her side, I saw what was left of her face. She lifted her arm and held it to me. It looked like I wanted to scream but couldn't. Instead, I ran. I ran as fast as I could back to the cabin, pulling my mask back over my face along the way. Mom was peeling the husk from some corn when I ran into the yard. I stumbled to the ground, and she ran over. The inside of my mask was soaked with tears, and I was having trouble breathing in. "Nestor, what's wrong?" she asked, kneeling in front of me. Her fingers drifted to the untied twine at the bottom of my neck. "Oh no," she said. Did she see your face?" "They're still alive," I said. "We can take them out of the woods." "It's too late for them, son. I'm sorry." I cried violently for another few moments, then looked at my mom. "When you said something bad would happen if someone saw my face, you didn't mean something bad would happen to me, did you?" I sat in the kitchen while Mom brought me a glass of cool water. I could tell she was stalling, but I didn't care. Everything was wrong, and nothing she said would make it better. She sat in front of me and grabbed my hand. "I didn't want to tell you. I hoped I would never have to." She looked from side to side, then at me. In the town I grew up in, this small place on the other side of the woods, there were stories of things in the forest. Things that only showed themselves when they wanted to be seen. Spirits, ghosts, monsters. Natives had a name for this particular brand of spirits that I can't remember. She continued. Us in town always just called them face stealers. My heart stopped beating for a moment. Folks said, if you looked at the faces, they would take yours. All us kids figured they were just stories meant to keep us from wandering too far into the woods. That's what adults do, right? Tell kids fibs to keep them from getting hurt? That's what I learned to do, Nestor. And I'm wondering if it was right. I'm wondering if I should have just told you this stuff from the beginning. She sighed. I wanted to say something, but my mind couldn't find the words. I went most of my life believing that there was no such thing as magic and things were only the way they were, Mom said before pausing to look at me. One day, I was walking in the woods, just trying to clear my head. I might have wandered farther than I should have, but I grew up around the trees. I knew how to find my way back. As I was fixing to turn around, I noticed a man a few yards away from me, off the trail. I didn't think nothing of it at first. Figured he was out hunting or something like that. But when he turned to me, his face was missing. Cut clean off. Took everything except his teeth and ears. My hands started to shake. I didn't want to believe anything she was saying, but the image of Jamie's skinless face refused to leave my head. I started walking backwards, thinking this man must have lost his mind. But it occurred to me that maybe all those stories I thought were bullshit actually had some truth to them. She looked at me, then away. It was the first time I'd ever heard her curse. I kept moving away from the man when I saw this small body facing away from me, a few yards away, off the trail. A kid, no older than 2 or 3, completely unclothed in the woods by themselves. I walked towards them, thinking they might be in danger from the man. Then I saw it. A clump of skin on the ground in a pile like some fucked up anthill. The holes for his eyes were the only thing I saw before turning away. I didn't know what to do. I thought about just leaving you out there, but then you started to cry. A painful cry that broke my heart. I couldn't have kids on my own, but she swallowed her saliva. I wrapped my outside shirt over your head and picked you up. And when you wrapped your tiny arms around my neck, I knew that I had to protect you, so I just kept walking deeper and deeper into the woods, not knowing what to do, but hoping I'd figure it out along the way. She answered the first question I had without me having to say anything. I don't know who left you there or why, she said. I wondered if your real parents would ever come looking for you. And maybe that's partly why I wanted us to stay hidden as we could. Her eyes drifted to me. There was a long, heavy silence. Nestor, she said, I don't want to ask, son, but I think I have to. When your friend did what she did you like it? Of course I didn't like it, I thought as I wandered back through the woods. I didn't have time to examine my emotions at the time, though. I thought I was terrified, but had I confused excitement for terror? The sun was beginning to set when I made it to the spot where Jamie and Monty lay. They were both on their backs, their bodies still against the bright green grass. I warily approached, not wanting to see what had become of their faces, but unable to stop myself. I stopped just shy of their bodies and noticed something on the ground. A small mound of pink flesh stared back at me, and I knew it was her face. I didn't move for a few moments, my stomach turning at the idea of what her face might look like detached from her body. Still, I moved towards it, seeing a few insects had begun picking away at the flesh. I picked it up, dusting these small creatures away while feeling the softness of the flesh between my fingers. As the stinky blood coated my palms, I felt the side of my mouth begin to curl into a smile. I gasped and dropped Jamie's face before running away from the scene, wiping the blood from my hands onto my pants. I sat in my room staring at the wall for a long time. My body still buzzed from the feeling of Jamie's face between my fingers. The fear and sickness had all disappeared, instead replaced with an elation I'd never experienced. My body felt light, and the constant fear and anxiety that usually filled my brain had gone away. I felt confident and more intelligent, though it seemed impossible at the time. I sat with the feeling, not wanting it to leave. However, when it did, I felt worse than I ever had. A dark cloud seemed to surround my head as my body felt heavy and bound to the space around me. The realization that I would never see my best friend again came rushing into me, and the guilt of knowing I had caused her death made me wish I were the one lying lifeless in the grass instead of her. I cried for the next few hours until it felt like I had no tears left. My mom had come by to check on me several times, but avoided coming into my room. Just let me know if you need something, okay? She asked once. I heard her move to her room and shut the door. She never closed her room at night before that day. I could tell there was something different about her, and it became more evident over the next few days. She no longer walked around the house like an authority figure, but more like someone trying to avoid eye contact with a mean dog. She never brought up the incident again, and I was thankful for it. The guilt of killing Jamie never went away, though neither did the remembrance of that ecstasy I experienced afterwards. It created a temptation in me to go out and find someone else to whom I could show my face to. It became a regular craving. Usually, it was more like one might crave sugar after going a long time without any. But some nights, it was almost comparable to starvation. It became so bad that one day, I saw my mom working outside, busy and distracted with chores. I approached from behind and started removing my mask without thinking. My mom heard me approach and spun around, dropping the garden hose she'd been using. The look of fear in her face, the woman who'd ensured my survival, who'd loved me despite knowing I was a monster. Seeing her that terrified of me, it almost hurt worse than Jamie. Mom slept with a chair against her door that night and for most nights after. While she was sleeping one night, I snuck into her craft room, spotting a large needle she used on leather. I grabbed it, taking a thick roll of twine as well. Jamie's face flashed in my mind. First, her face the first time I'd met her, followed by the last time. I knew it was horrible, but my emotions and my brain weren't matching. And at the time, I felt like my brain was right. If the cravings weren't going to stop, then I needed to prevent my mask from ever coming off again. I took the needle and the twine and held them to my neck for a moment before taking a deep breath. The needle punctured my skin, then the mask leather. I cringed as the twine slid through my flesh and felt every centimeter of its rough edges scraping the inside of my skin. Lines of crimson fell from every puncture in my neck. The harsh stinging I'd felt when I first punctured my skin had become a dull pain. For the first time in my life, the mask felt warm and comforting. I breathed in its leathery smell before lying back on my bed. Thankful I'd never hurt anyone like I'd hurt Jamie. My bed is much more comfortable these days. I invested in a weighted blanket and a goose down pillow, and you truly can tell the difference. In a month, it'll be 10 years since I left the woods. Mom died a year prior, and being out there by myself, well, it was lonelier than I can describe. Though on some nights, I would give a lot of money for the peace and quiet of the woods. My apartment overlooks a bustling downtown area, and while the view is amazing, the noise of the city can be a bit overwhelming at times. Thank God for the noise-canceling headphones my ex-girlfriend gifted me for Christmas last year. Though it's my day off, I decided to do some cleaning. I never got around to hiring a new cleaner, and the place has become a bit of a sty. I go to the bathroom and look in the mirror for a moment, seeing my night mask staring back at me. It's more lucid than any of the masks I had been growing up, but thick enough to prevent me from seeing my actual face. This mask is milky white and made of thin plastic. It only covers my face, leaving my hair, eyes, and neck visible. The scars where I'd sewn that old mask on became a pale white over the years. No one ever asked about them. There were only a few people who've ever seen me with my shirt off. Lining the bathroom counter are several other masks. Ones I made myself from materials I've collected over the years. I've been perfecting them since leaving the woods. I was able to get away with crude masks for a while, using the excuse of having bad scarring, but I realized how much better it was to get close to someone before doing what I had to do. And people want something they can see. Eyes that react to them. Lips that move. Cheeks that wrinkle when smiling. I think I've almost got my masks perfect. They contour to every crease of my face and match my skin color perfectly. Only sometimes will someone notice something off about my face. Maybe they spot a plasticky sheen to the synthetic skin or see makeup lines around my lips or eyes. They only make a look of concern and continue about their day, wondering if what they saw was only their imagination. I decide to clean my room first, starting with the mess of clothes in the closet. Before getting started though, I decide to reminisce and drag out the leather box near the back corner of the closet. I place it on my bed and pull the flap open. A smile climbs up on my cheeks. I've managed to preserve most of them, with the latest ones being those of my ex-girlfriend in the cleaners. There are 23 in total, and I have plans for several more. So I'm probably going to need to find a better storage system. Seeing all the empty eye sockets and jagged edges of the faces always makes me feel a slight amount of the elation I felt upon taking them. It also makes me sad though. Sad that it didn't go back for her face before the forest took it. And alright guys, that wraps up some disturbing horror stories from Reddit. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please comment down below and let me know your thoughts down below. And also please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And this is the best community on YouTube, hands down. I love you guys. You guys are awesome. And yeah, comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see videos longer than this, shorter than this, or is this kind of hour and a half to hour and 20 minutes time good? Let me know down below. Like I said, I read every single comment, so please comment down below your thoughts. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. It means the world. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.